excited to go first. So I'm Kerry. I am currently an early stage investor at Accel. We're focused on AI software companies at the seed and Series A. And before that, for 7 years, I was a AI recruiting founder. I founded a company called Searchlight. We're building a full system AI platform from resume screen all the way to reference checks to a post-hire survey. And in 2023, thanks to GPT coming out, we were able to rebrand the entire system as an agent called Tracy, and it led to our acquisition by Multiverse a couple years ago. Accel was my first ever partner. They invested in me at the seed stage, and so when they reached out a couple years ago to think about rejoining the early stage founding journey, but just in a different way, it was very hard for me to pass up. So I've been there for the last year.
Amazing. So your experience is not relevant at all for this conversation. All right, Jason.
Great to see everybody. So I'm Jason. I've been at OpenAI for about 2.5 years. I lead a team, we call it the Enterprise Technology Team. Essentially, I work with large tech companies to implement AI, both for the products that they're building and then internally. I'm super excited to be here. I was here 12 months ago at the last Shine. I think how we think about talent management is changing in the world. We see a lot of our customers that have different viewpoints. So super excited to have that conversation with you.
Hey everyone, I'm Saurabh. I'm a VP of Engineering at Liberate. Super excited to be here. Super excited to see everyone here. What we do at Liberate is we're building voice AI agents. And when I think of voice, it's like the most amazing technology when it comes to AI, and AI and voice together are even better. We are building native voice AI agents for handling all the insurance workflows. Think of like you're in an accident, you call your carrier, and it goes through an agent, and our agent is able to do everything in terms of not just taking the phone call, but actually filing the claim for you. So we have this end-to-end workflow automation. Super excited. We're just starting, and we have a long way to go. Before this, I was at Google for 6 years, Twitter, Microsoft 10 years, Amazon. So I've seen all of the revolutions that have happened over the last 15, 20 years, cloud revolution, mobile revolution, but the AI revolution trumps them all. This is like the biggest revolution ever, and I'm super excited that we get to build the forefront of this technology at Liberate. So super excited to be here. Thank you, Ben.
Amazing. Well, thank you all for spending the time. All right, I'm gonna start with Jason first. So let's imagine that I went on a mission to Mars for the last 12 months, and I just came back to Earth, and I'm like, Jason, catch me up. What's happened in AI? Like, what did I miss while I've been gone? Can you give just from your vantage point, like what's the bird's eye view on the most important AI developments of last year, performance changes, new approaches, development, models, harnesses? Like, I know it's a very difficult question, but maybe give us the chapters.
Yeah. Man, a year in this industry, as you all know, is a long time. There's headlines every single week, essentially. So a lot's changed. From a technology standpoint, there's been improvements at every level of the stack. So when you think about chips and how these models are powered, and you think about the models themselves and how efficient they are, and then what their capabilities are, there's basically been improvements across the entire stack. But I think those pieces are less interesting than the output of these models. Now, I think a year ago, we were all talking about agents, but in reality, there weren't too many agents that we actually saw a lot of useful utility from, and that's probably changed. I mean, everybody here probably uses AI for more sophisticated tasks today than they did a year ago. And the big reason why is because these models have become more reliable and capable at long-running tasks. We call those agents, but more or less it means that they can think longer, they can make multiple turns before they come back with an answer, and as a result, they're able to be much more effective, which has really been amazing to see.
What enables them to be more effective in long-range tasks?
So two things really enable that. The first is that the models can, what we call think longer, and that's basically they can establish a strategy on how to answer your question. And then the second element of this is they can take multiple turns really effectively. So to give you an example, a year ago, you open up ChatGPT and you type, what's the best croissant bakery in San Francisco, which is Arsico, right? I think everybody should go try that out, by the way, if you haven't. That would essentially be one message that is sent to OpenAI, and the LLM is going to return an answer to you. Now that looks very different. If you ask that same question, what's the best bakery for croissants in San Francisco? There would be software wrapped around the initial response, and it might indicate to the model, hey, you should probably use a search tool, and you might want to look up Yelp and see what those reviews look like, or you might want to look up Google Map to see what users like. And then it would return a result to the user. And even before it gets to the user, the software around the model might write, hey, go double check your answer. And that very simple ask of just saying, hey, take another turn on this could actually improve your results. And this is something that you don't see at all as an end user. But you do see that sometimes when you, for example, click a thinking model, like the results take longer. And that's why. It's because it's making multiple turns and it's doing these things in the background that as a user you don't see, but ultimately end up getting you a much more reliable result. And that happens at scale, which is why more and more often you'll ask an AI system or you'll ask ChatGPT to do something, you'll ask Codex to do something. And at least for me, I'm surprised that it comes back with exactly what I needed.
Kerry, you have such an interesting perspective. You're like building AI like 7 years ago, then post ChatGPT, now investing. Can you talk about thinking back to when you were building AI at Searchlight versus today, paint a picture of how different the available tools and capabilities are, just like the difference?
It could not be more different. I feel like you would have to travel the entire galaxy and come back, and that's like the amount of time that's passed since I started Searchlight. And the biggest thing is that like everything from the underlying infrastructure to the overall products have been completely different. I remember when we were training our own models at Searchlight, because we didn't have GPT, we didn't have these open source, like we didn't have LLM APIs that we can plug in. We had to stitch together like 7 laptops to train on our own data sets so that we can provide it for our own customers. So that's like really different. And I also think just in terms of capabilities, things like resume screening, when we started, we had to build ourselves versus LLMs being able to provide it out of the box. So really, I think that like the pace of AI change is now on the speed of weeks and months. So it's really hard to think back to 7 years ago.
Yeah, one comment I'll have about that is I think AI has been around for a long time. It's been a field that was actually developed and started in the 50s in North Carolina. And there's been specialized AI for a long time. So AI that is good at specific tasks, like you could train a model to read a resume. But it's really been more recent that we've seen more generalized models, which means they can do kind of anything out of the box. And that's been one of the most amazing things to see.
Saurabh, anything else you'd add that's like in the last 6 or 12 months that's like been a revelation?
Absolutely. So like Jason said, I think the models are growing and getting better overnight. And that's amazing. That gives so much raw power and intelligence. For us, I think the challenge has been, how do we get to the last mile of AI? How do we take these models and really apply them in a real world engineering problems to be able to solve real problems that users have? I'll give you an example. When somebody's calling to report an accident while they're on a freeway, where there's a traffic going on in the background, and they are sort of not in their best state of mind, the last thing you want to do is talk to a robot. But how do you want to make sure that they have the best experience in terms of not just getting their work done, but getting it done reliably? It's not just about, can we talk to them? It's more about, can we finish the work for them? Can we file that claim for them in the minimum time possible, with the minimum steps possible? I think that's where a lot of the engineering goes into place in terms of making these models really stick in the real world.
I want to talk about a few different areas. We talked about agents. We'll talk about voice. Let's start on agents, because that is the defining, I think, paradigm, in particular in conjunction with long context models or thinking models. Can one of you define can you define an agent exactly? Like, what is an agent and what is a harness? And what is the difference between how a single agent works versus a multi-agent? I don't know if who wants to take a go.
I think an agent, just think of it simply as you assign it a task, and then it uses context, it uses tool, it uses feedback to get you an answer. So rather than, you might ask it, what's the weather on Friday? It's a very simple call and response. An agent could take on a more complex task, and it would use tools and sort of like maybe go through multiple iterations of an answer to get you a better result. Let me simplify it even further. As I said that, I realized that's not complicated. Just think of an agent as something that completes a task using tools. That's probably the easiest way to think of it. And that could be a single task, or it might do something really complex, like book you a trip, in which case it might want other agents to help it solve some problems. And so these agents kind of could work together in a swarm, almost like if you had a team of travel advisors to book a flight or to book a trip. They would kind of work together in order to accomplish that task.
Saurabh, can you define a harness, and why is a harness important on an agent?
So like Jason was saying, I think a big part of agent is how do you complete a task successfully? And to be able to do that, you need predictability. You want to make sure that you're able to solve a deterministic problem using a probabilistic model as close to deterministic way as possible. And that's where harness comes in, where it gives you a scaffolding or a map to actually call the right agent, the right tools, the right APIs at the right time. And that's where the harnesses come into the picture, because they make the scaffolding around the model so much more predictable and deterministic.
Talk about, have you built your own harness? There's obviously like harnesses that are being provided by the foundation model companies now, sort of like out of box. Like, what have you done at Liberate? And can you talk about, what's the architecture look like for? Yeah.
So insurance space is messy. Like, it's has a lot of legacy systems. There's a lot of like different systems of record, payment records, telephony systems. So for us, we have built our own harnesses on top of the models. That also gives us a modular architecture where we can replace the models as the models are growing every day without necessarily affecting the harnesses themselves. So there's separation of concerns there. But a lot of our harnesses is all about how do we effectively have the multi-agent architecture in terms of doing various things in the same call, because a person could be reporting a loss and also wanting to add a policy holder as part of the same call. So that's two different agents in the same call, sharing the same context. The call can go from anywhere from 2 minutes to sometimes 30 minutes, 60 minutes. And we have a large context window, so making sure that the models are not hallucinating when the context window becomes so large. And then ensuring that when we do have action to be taken, whether it's filing a claim or making sure that's integrated into the system of record for the customer, all of those tool calls are happening reliably and correctly. So all of that is part of our own harnesses that we build on top of it, because that gives us more control and more determinism in terms of how we are interfacing with the insurance systems.
Context window is really important, particularly for the long-running tasks and for like needing multi-agents for certain workflows. When you talk about like, maybe folks at this point are very familiar, but like, what's the constraint of the context window, and then why do multi-agent systems kind of address the challenge associated with like a limited context window?
Yeah, I'll say, so, I mean, it's just like us, like people, right? If I was to listen to a 2-hour-long talk and try to sort of recap everything that was said in that discussion, it would be hard. And these models are similar in that the context window has been getting better, and it's been increasing over the last few years, but there's still a limit in terms of how effectively it can take your instructions and then action on them very clearly, right? If you give it a 50-page set of instructions, and one of those instructions is make sure that you write back in a positive tone, it might forget that as it accomplishes all of the tasks. And so by breaking up the instructions into multiple calls that occur across multiple systems, you get better specialization essentially with these agents and better results. And so I think agents will continue to be more capable. I think in everything you do in terms of how your teams operate, the types of work they do, how you assess talent and manage them, I think these systems will be better at evaluating that and facilitating that. But to do so, oftentimes you'll need to kind of specialize the tasks that each is doing.
Kerry, I'm sure a huge number of the companies that you're talking to on a daily basis are building autonomous agents for X thing. Talk to me about what you're seeing. Do you think that, do you think autonomous agents can be like unleashed on production systems? And like, what are the more, what do you think the limitations, what's exciting? What are things that you've seen that you're like, oh wow, that's amazing? And where you're like, yeah, I don't think we're ready for that. And I don't think that's going to work properly.
I think it's really fun to think about OpenClaw in this context. So I would say, even though agents have been part of our vocabulary for the last few years, true, like real agents that can work more autonomously with context and their own tools really came into the mainstream and was really seen to be possible with OpenClaw back in November of last year. Prior to that, agents were more like agentic workflows behind the scenes. So companies were more defining like standard operating practices, and these agents would do the work, but more limited to a certain amount of operating practices. Starting with OpenClaw, we actually saw harnesses could in fact become so powerful that these agents can work more proactively in the background with a certain level of tools and could be more set loose, if you will.
What was it about OpenClaw that made that was like a change, basically?
I think there were a few things. Okay, so one is that it was open source, and that anyone, whether you were a builder or if you were a hobbyist, right, a recruiting leader, could just download OpenClaw, run it on your own computer, and all of a sudden you had a proactive assistant, right, which is a magical feeling. And the other thing about OpenClaw that was great was the timing of it all, which was that it was released in November, and people had, maybe were trying to get away from their families during the holiday break, and wanted an excuse to go into their rooms, and they can actually hack with OpenClaw, and they actually could see and use OpenClaw as a way to understand, oh wow, the models have really gone better. So I think there was a conglomeration of different factors that made OpenClaw the phenomenon that it was. And it led to us really realizing that proactive agents were possible. But to go back to your point, do I believe that proactive agents could really run amok and be used, with free will on production systems? I actually don't think we're quite there yet. Every other day you do hear of, like another agent that deleted the entire database for a company, and you ask them why, and they're like, yeah, I know you told me not to do that, but I did it anyway, right? So I think that's like what Saurabh said about.
That sounds like my 5-year-old. Yeah.
And you know what? I think AI accountability is a whole other question to talk about, but I just think that's why the harness is so important. Setting guidelines is so important. Setting like checks and balances to really make sure that these agents, we're getting the most value while decreasing the risks.
Can y'all talk about interoperability? Like, there's agents from you're building in-house. There's agents from this third party. How is the industry thinking about interoperability standards, agents collaborating? When you kind of share, what does that even mean? And maybe how does OpenAI think about that? Yeah.
So we described how you're probably going to have multiple agents that take on complex works. And that means that those agents might not all be from the same company or from the same system. And so it's important that they know how to communicate with each other. And so that's why you need certain protocols. It's just like how the internet was built, and there's a lot of different tools that are utilized on the internet, and they have to kind of connect or speak a common language. And it's interesting that these things kind of evolve organically in a way. People put out ideas, MCP, which you may have heard that term thrown around, but it's basically just how do you connect different systems to AI. And I think agents will have similar types of protocols in terms of how do they communicate with each other in a safe way. I think one good example of interoperability might be when we think about shopping and commerce. So with OpenClaw, you could have OpenClaw go and buy clothes for you, right? But if you think about this at scale, at some point, systems and banks have to have a way of knowing, okay, is this an agent? Is this fraud? Is this acceptable or not? And so there needs to be some kind of protocol for how these agents would interact and make commerce purchases. And that's an example of all of this kind of infrastructure that needs to be built to make sure that there's clear communication.
Last year, we talked about what are the big areas that are going to kind of define the coming year. And I think one of the big topics was voice. Voice as a, just voice as a UI, like the capability of voice, just because there's so much opportunity for voice to be, put into, workflows, et cetera. And I think it's a really interesting area because there's like a lot of recruiting applications, right? We have a voice agent. So there's a bunch of applications within the recruiting space and others. It'd be interesting to double click on, how does voice AI work? Like, what is the tool stack that actually enables it? It's right. It's not one thing. And obviously you're building, a voice AI product. Can you talk about kind of like, what are the components that go into making voice AI actually work, like the individual components? Because I think it'll help everyone kind of understand it better.
Absolutely. So when we think of voice AI, we think of the conversation, but there's so much more beyond the conversation. Yes, like, when you're conversing, the first thing is how do we convert like speech to text? But like once you have in the text, especially when you're doing it in a very real-time way, you don't have a lot of time to process, to sort of like, reason, to then respond. And plus you have to make sure that everything you're saying makes sense as well. So the components come from like, where you start with the telephony piece, which is the actual phone call itself, the phone call quality. How do you convert from speech to text? How do you then have a reasoning in terms of understanding what the person is saying, what their intent is, what their goals are? How do you then maintain that in a state inside the system itself? And then based on that, you break it down into a set of steps that you want to take in order to respond. And that's where orchestration comes in. That's where you have tool calls come in. And then these tools are getting called to do that particular action that the user wants It could be like, hey, do you have my policy number? So all of that is going through this state system, going into the tool call, going and talking to the system of record, pulling the claim, and then bringing it back from text to speech and saying it back to the user. So,
And what's the time period in which that's happening?
microseconds. So it has to be like zero latency, like or near zero latency. Otherwise, the user is like,
And which part of that whole end-to-end would you say is sort of like the weak link still today, like the most challenging part, or something that maybe folks wouldn't necessarily realize was like still problematic?
I think the models have done a great job in terms of reducing this latency and being able to go very fast. The place where we still have a lot of area to improve is ensuring that these models or the agents are not over-indexing itself to say the wrong things or hallucinating when the stakes are high. So having the right evals to make sure they're doing the right things. And evals is just evaluation framework. It's almost like having an AI watching AI to making sure that the AI is doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason, putting in the right thing and saying the right thing back. So I think those are the things which we still are aggressively working on to make sure that, again, we can hold AI to a high bar.
Yeah.
I have a quick audience question. Okay, quick poll. So who uses voice today to regularly interact with AI? Could you quick show hands? Okay, if you haven't, it is really easy. I mean, we kind of underestimate, it's a lot faster. It's probably 4 times faster than typing on average. And we underestimate a little bit about how seamless that experience is. And you can just see that in the future as this gets more reliable, as it becomes more mainstream and acceptable to kind of like talk to yourself, to your AI. It's going to be a primary way in which you interact with these systems. And that's probably very different from a year ago in terms of how much you might speak into AI. And I think a year from now, these systems will be even better, and you'll be talking and having multi-turn conversations in order to get what you need.
I want to talk about generalized models versus specialized models, right? There's a lot of companies building some really interesting, specialized vertical AI companies in finance or insurance or what have you. But then the general purpose models are getting, so much better. Where will specialization matter? If the general purpose models are getting better and better, where does specialization actually matter and create advantage or differentiation? I don't know, maybe Kerry, I don't know how you think about that from an investor perspective, or Jason, obviously y'all building some pretty powerful general purpose models in your building. But yeah, anyone have a perspective to share on that?
This might be a hot take, but I think that there's always room for specialized models, right? I do think that, so the generalized models can get us 80% of the way there, but there's always that last mile. And there are always going to be those super users that will notice the difference between the last mile with the not only the generalized model, but like a specialized layer on top of it, and then the additional UX and additional data points and additional training. I think there's always room for that.
So, but the specialization is like above the model layer from your vantage point. It's not like the core model LLM itself, but it's all the layers on top. Would you agree with that, or is there actually a value in like a specialized model itself?
Okay, so definitely specialization in UX for vertical AI on top of generalized models will be valuable. And then 2, I do think that the room for specialized models in itself will come down to cost. So, I actually did recently look at an AI recruiting company, and they are fine-tuning their own open source models for their product. And they're finding that even though the open source models may not be as high performant as a GPT or an Opus, it's still good enough. Their users are not complaining about it. And then 2, their costs have come down by 10x, right? So I think that there's definitely room for, if you realize that you can get a good enough of performance, the cost trade-off is worth it.
Jason, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think I even think about
that's probably
specialization.
bad. That's a terrible model. No,
You can think about specialization 2 ways. One is you want the model to be smarter, more performant. So maybe you want it to be like really good at answering medical questions. And so you want something better than what a generalized model would be. And so you train something really specific for that. Actually, we did that recently. We released a model specialized for healthcare, right? I think that's really hard to do if you're not a foundation model company. The amount of, these training runs are massive now, and we're releasing new models every 4 to 6 weeks that raise the capability of all types of functions. and capabilities. So it's really tough to train a model to be smarter, I think, unless you are a very specialized niche that has a lot of resources. I think training something to be more efficient is a much more pragmatic view, which is you could take a model and you basically think about like you have this massive model, you shrink it down so that it's half the size, but it's really good at just one thing, and you kind of like make it a little dumber or less capable at everything else. That model is going to be more efficient, it's going to be faster. And so that is a very valid use case, I think, for specialization. But in terms of, hey, I want something to be better at these HR tasks, I think my view is these models are just getting better every 4 to 6 weeks. It's a lot of money, it's a lot of time and effort to try to do something specialized there.
You obviously have a point of view on.
Yes. I have a question. Like, if you have a hard problem, who do you go to? Do you want to go to the doctor in town? Do you want to go to the cardiologist in town? Or do you want to go to the best cardiologist in town? I would go to the best cardiologist in town. And that's where I think the specialization comes in. It's like, yes, the models can do a lot of things, but like a Swiss Army knife, unless you actually build the special sauce on top, the last mile, in terms of really making sure it has all the edge cases covered, all the real world scenarios covered, like no plan survives the contact with the enemy, and the same thing. No model can survive the contact with the real use case that you want to use it in, and you have to build that specialization on top of it, at least in my experience.
Do you think that people underestimate, because I feel like it's so easy to get a magical 80%, like one prompt, one shot and get a response, but do you think people underestimate the challenge of the last model and actually the gap there? Like, what's been your experience?
Yeah, for sure. To me, I think especially let's say in recruiting, like, if it's not just like a 2-minute call or a 5-minute call, like, you have interviews that could be like 30 minutes, 60 minutes. And that's where, if you want to truly build an intelligence system, you got to have that specialization in terms of, like, understanding where the nuances are, where the gaps are, where the drops are, where the tone is changing. And all of that needs specific things that you are tracking or making sure is part of your prompt engineering or your context engineering or your tool set that is looking for those sort of variations, those multiple intents, the multiple turns, the loopbacks in the conversation, and all of that needs to be done at a very specialized way.
What do you look for when you're investing in a startup that makes you feel like they may have some durability and some moat? I think that's a big question for a lot of software companies in general. Like these, OpenAI will release whatever next Wednesday, and Anthropic will do it the following Thursday. And I think a lot of folks look at sort of some of the areas in technology and software and kind of wonder are they going to consume a lot of the applications? When you're looking at an early stage company, like what's your view on, hey, this can be durable and can compete and sustain against foundation companies that are building more and more intelligence?
I think that, so one way I can answer the question is in a very just direct way. It's like, I think that the one compounding advantage that most companies will still have is data. If you can get proprietary data on a certain use case to make you really become a world-class expert on it that other people can't, that is the real durable advantage. And if you just keep working with specific customers, get more data over time, that can actually lead to a head start that can be maintained. That's one specific way. But the other, I think maybe more general truth is that when the world is changing so quickly, I prefer investing in founders that are more realistic that the world is changing. And I am more likely to back a founder that will be honest and say, you know what, we will probably not have the answer to always be durable and be differentiated. We do expect to get punched in the face with every new model release, and
every founder should expect to get punched in the face.
Absolutely.
That'd be the first question you
every
ask.
Day.
Yeah. Every day. Yeah.
Every day. But you'd be shocked how many people will say, no, we'll just be better. But I actually look for more of the truth seekers and the realists, right? And saying, you know what, the world is changing under our feet. And I look for more of it's more a personality, right? Of being adaptable and being resilient in the face of all this change.
Yeah, so as things are moving really quickly, it's so chaotic and there's competitive shifts and new models. Like Jason, when you're working with your clients, right? These are enterprise technology companies, you're advising them on deploying AI. Like, what are the principles or the advice that you're giving them to set themselves up for success today and help them kind of keep responding and taking advantage of new things that are coming out, et cetera? Like, what is practically?
Yeah, I think how you the culture that you set at your company is very important on this front because the technology is going to change. But you've probably all been hearing from CEOs for the last 2 years how important AI is. And so like it very much is, I think that message is clear, but then pragmatically how you set that up across the organization, how you get people energized to adopt AI ends up making a huge difference and ends up making sort of the difference in terms of whether your team is able to incorporate these new technology changes quickly. And so it's interesting because all of the technology changes that we see in my primary audience, I work a lot with engineering and product individuals, but it still comes down ultimately to kind of how you structure and encourage your teams in your company.
So technically, and from an engineering perspective, the models keep changing, things are changing. How do you set yourself up to take advantage? Just very practically, to give a sense into like the builder side of things. What's the infrastructure you've created to be like not fall behind, basically?
Yeah, so I think it's very hard to keep up with the rapid pace at which models are evolving. So we have to systemize that by way of measuring benchmarks against production workloads. So every time a new model drops in, a new tech drops in, we just benchmark it against the production workloads. So unless it's giving us better speed, better accuracy, better safety, better reliability, to me, it's not of interest.
Are you testing every new model that comes out?
Every new major model that comes out, yes.
And what does that actually mean?
So we just run it against our production benchmark tests and see if it's giving us any of the better accuracy or measurability.
And you have a suite of evals that are across all those areas, and and how long does that take usually?
Overnight.
Overnight?
Yeah.
So overnight, you know whether or not you're gonna push a new model. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Can I use an analogy of how I see the new world of companies? I see the new world of companies being more like factories, when in the past, maybe companies could be more like craftsmen, where in the past, you could have an amazing vision, an idea of a product that you want to bring out into the world, and you can spend all your time thinking about the exact tech stack that could make this beautiful painting come into the world. And then over time, as you release it, you'll tweak the painting and make it better and better and better. I think in the new world, when things are so quickly changing, companies that will be more successful, more like a factory with like a supply chain that they're investing in, making sure that actually their entire tech stack and suppliers could change overnight with every new model that comes out. And then they're more like fine-tuning a system that can always be adaptable and push out new products as quickly as possible. And actually we're seeing companies actually become more multi-product much earlier. So that's a very, to me, like that's a very big difference in how the companies of today will be against the companies of today.
I love that analogy, and I feel like the big part of that is how you're building your system. So one of the things that we've done is we made our architecture very modular. So changing a model, if it is indeed giving you a better accuracy or better reliability, is sort of a quick change on an interface on an API rather than a whole surgery on the system.
Yeah, just to give one more example of that, imagine you have a team of like insurance adjusters, and they take claims and they file them, and that's their job. And then imagine if every week there's sort of new candidates that are potentially more intelligent now saying, hey, we could do this job better, and there's low overhead to switch those people out. I think you'd need a very clear understanding of what makes a good insurance adjuster, and you'd need a really clear scorecard around that. And the advantage there is then you could actually evaluate all these new opportunities, this new talent, or this new intelligence that comes in to decide, okay, who actually would be best at this job? And if you don't have that structure in place, then you're sort of relying on judgment, which is very confusing when you have multiple models coming out every week or in a month-long period.
All right, we're gonna do a lightning round of hot takes because it wouldn't be an AI panel without hot takes because I want to leave time for questions. So I would love to hear from each of you over the next 12 months, what's a capability and experience, technology that either doesn't exist today or is kind of like fringe that you think will be mainstream or like just the biggest like, oh my gosh, aha for folks in the room, as things progress?
I can go first. I feel like, the world, the way it's moving with the pace of the models and how they're getting better, we'll soon get from system of knowledge, which the models are today, to system of action. The question will not be whether AI can do it. The question will be whether AI can do it reliably, repeatedly, consistently, again and again, which builds trust in the users. So as a user, I can trust it to do the right thing when I'm not watching over the shoulder. And that's where we'll have the biggest innovation over the next 6 to 12 months.
People will trust the systems more to just run.
And we'll build the right harnesses, the right evals, the right systems of auditing and like traceability or even reversibility when it's doing a bad thing, so that the users trust it to do the right thing and can trust if it does the wrong thing, it can be reversible.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think we have a strong opinion that we are very close to this. Like, it is going to happen in the next 12 months. So just a simple example, you ask an agent you ask your AI, hey, book me a reservation at a restaurant on Friday. The ability to do that effectively and to kind of like know what questions to ask you, I think we're essentially going to be there very soon. And it can actually do this quite well in some cases. But to specific capabilities, as you asked, I think computer use is a really interesting one, which is a piece to make that happen, which is just, if you have a direct connector to a website, that's the easiest way to make sure that you're getting the information you need. But in a lot of cases today, AI can just kind of move your mouse and read a screen and know exactly what is being outputted there and then do what you want it to. And so it can do this today. The accuracy isn't great, but it will get much better in the coming year. I think we'll sort of fit into this piece of making these actions happen.
What's wild is a year ago, we had this conversation. Nobody mentioned computer use. Now you're talking about it. I'm like, everyone's already very familiar with computer use. Everyone knows about computer use, but it's just crazy how fast things have changed. Yeah. Kerry, what about you, real quick?
I'll take it a step further in terms of like productivity. I think that more of us will have AI friends. And I think that truly,
no new friends.
I started already talking to, my, chatbots as like, oh, Dr. Claude or, Dr. Chat. But I think over time in the next year, even like we're referring to like a friend that we've named that's actually an AI, and that we'll become much more comfortable talking to them. And just on the topic of, the speech to text and the, voice AI stuff, I already know of some people that have an AI app open and they're just constantly talking to it like the entire day. And that can become more and more mainstream in the next year.
Yeah, why friend? Why not family?
I can replace
AI
Teddy.
No,
Teddy, sorry, bud. Yeah. All right, I want to go to questions because there's only a couple of minutes left, and we'll go a minute over too because I want to make sure we have time for questions if there are any. But anyone have questions for? First of all, thank you very much. But questions for the panel from folks in the audience? Yeah.
So in our world, everything's changed on our world. So I think about today. Sorry. Thank you. So everything is changing in our world, and I think about investments, and I think about OpenAI and Anthropic, and you're essentially cannibalizing, if you will, all of sort of your SaaS companies. Where like our recruiters, I was talking to one of my recruiters, has 20 bots that he's leveraging. No reason for me to invest in. No reason for me to invest in Juicebox or leveraging other solutions. It's gangs of New York right now, where we have Glean, Anthropic, whatever, Presto, Hired Score. I'm trying to think like Winston, like surrounded, and they're all fighting for small pieces of growth, I'll say, in workflow, which is now going to be done by AI that we're already developing. So I struggle with, why would I invest in something now? I'm sort of waiting to see what plays out, and we'll just build leveraging. We're not using chat, but we're Anthropic. Like, we'll just build it, and if we want, we'll wait and see. And I'm sort of just stuck with, how do I manage the gangs of New York? I suspect it's Glean will index things for us and just sort of let these things settle. But I'm also hearing they're not going to settle. I mean, obviously it's very dynamic, continuous change. And I'm genuinely just curious as to where you think this is going and how it's impacting, I'll just say, Silicon Valley and all of these SaaS companies, particularly in the talent acquisition industry, because it really doesn't look good. There's going to have to be a significant amount of consolidation. And I'm not sure why you would really invest in really large enterprise solutions in the future. I'd love to, and Kerry in particular, like I'm really curious as to what you're investing in and how you're approaching it. But I'd love to hear from each of you on that.
Want to go? Yeah.
So at a high level, I actually would say my greatest learning as an investor compared to when I was a founder is that when I was a founder, I was biased to action. And now as an investor, I'm biased to wait. And I think the reality is that the space is so crowded. It's a bit chaotic. It's hard to see past 6 to 12 months. And so when I'm not sure if something's going to be durable long term, I will rather not invest. And so I only make 2 or 3 investments a year. I have not yet made an investment in AI recruiting for a lot of the reasons that you've described. So I think that's the reality of it all. So on the investor side, I can afford to wait. As an operator, it's more tough, right? Because you do have outcomes that you want to achieve today, and you do want to gain efficiencies today. And so it's more on operators to decide, like, is it worth plugging in a solution today, even though, again, think of your team as a factory, even though if like tomorrow as you have another supplier come and you have an eval for them and they're better, like you would have to probably replace them.
I would say my experience is in some areas similar to what Saurabh said, and in some areas it's not. So there are some workflows where, I love Codex, I love Cowork, like I use them all the time, for different things that I'm doing internally, right? And there are some workflows where I get what I get and I'm like, this is magical. I'm amazed. I was having this conversation with someone last night, like even using an MCP connected to some other tool of ours, like I'll maybe go through one of those tools to that tool and I get something back and I'm like, this is amazing. Let's say it's like, analyze the last 100 tickets we've gotten, at BrightHire to help me understand areas where we need to put some resources to fix some stuff, right? If it gives me back like a reasonably good answer, that's a heck of a lot better than what I had before, which was like going ticket by ticket and putting it into a Google Sheet. Maybe it missed 6 tickets, but I don't really care because it doesn't really matter, right? Like it's good enough. There are other workflows that we build within our product where, dang, it's hard. Like it was easy to get to the 80% version and like the team prototyped it and demoed it on a Friday afternoon. We're like, hot damn, we're gonna have this out in no time. And then the last 20%, the auditability, the quality, the reliability, the use case, the integration, is like, holy smokes, like that ends up being, it's not the last mile, it's actually the last 6 miles and you can't get it wrong. And so I think it depends a lot based on what the workflow is and the use case. And there'll be use cases where, you could build it, but if you think about what that last mile means and then the maintenance and then just like the burden of quality, it's like a little bit more of a tougher proposition versus others where it's like, if I get 96 out of 100 tickets, like whatever, it's like, this is magical. I had no capacity to get this insight for. So that's personally how I think about it. And we think about what are the workflows we want to solve and where do we want to double down and what are the things that we need to get right and where's the reliability and the quality. So it's just our point of view. Yeah. Any other questions for the group?
I do have one quick, I just wanted to call out that, at Liberate, a lot of the things that we've just spoken about, like these are the challenges that we're facing every day. We are innovating every day. We're doing like 2.8 million transactions a month. We are reliably running these agents in production. We have over 200 agents successfully running in production, but we have just barely scratched the surface. There's so much more to do. We are in a highly regulated space. We cannot get even one transaction wrong because that sort of like, opens up for lawsuits for our customers, which we absolutely don't want. So there is a lot of like 90% of the work is to close that last 10% of the gap. But also, quick plug, like we are hiring a head of talent.
Oh, I was going to do this for you. Yeah. This is a really important part of this. Yeah, go for it.
We are hiring a head of talent. It's a foundational role. And again, we're not just looking for someone coming in to fill in heads. We're looking for somebody who can shape the company. We are on a very high growth trajectory and we just started. So if you are interested or know someone who might be interested, I'd love to.
It would not be a recruiting conference if we didn't recruit from the stage, yes. And you want to join a company where the executive comes on stage and then shamelessly plugs for the recruiting. So I love that. Anyway, thank you all. Thank you for kicking it off today. I love this panel every year.